There's a new GMAT on the way and it's dropping pretty soon. In this session, we'll take a look at what's changing and what it means for you. GMAT says they spoke with schools and prospective candidates to come up with an exam that's more relevant in the business environment of tomorrow. While that may be true, it's also true that society is asking some tough questions, and some schools are opting out of exams and rankings entirely. Interesting times. But what really lit a fire under GMAT is competition from ETS, the guys behind the GRE exam. Now, these two organizations have a history. The short version is that for the longest time, GMAT was this absolutely tiny outfit that actually relied on ETS for everything. Eventually, GMAT terminated ETS's contract and ETS has been after them ever since. But if we fast forward to today, both these exams are hurting. Have a look at the numbers. Clearly, major drops for both tests. But the GMAT is only for business education, right? The GRE is a more general test. So, how can we compare these exams? Well, ETS does tell us what test takers reported as their intended field of study, so maybe we can use that. What's really interesting is that even when the market as a whole has been dropping, the number of GRE tests taken for business programs has remained relatively stable. In fact, it's been increasing in countries like India. I'm actually curious as to why. Is it that test takers appreciate having another option? Or is it that test prep companies are cross-selling their GRE prep to existing GMAT students? Either way, GMAT has a major problem on its hands. The GMAT's still much bigger than the GRE for B schools, but the gap is getting smaller. Now with the GMAT Focus Edition, we know what they're betting on. A shorter, simpler test. Okay, let's dive right in. The GMAT Focus Edition is almost an hour shorter than the old GMAT at 2 hours 25 minutes. GMAT has made the exam simpler mainly by cutting sentence correction from the verbal section and geometry from the quantitative section. They've also taken AWA out. What does this mean for you? Shorter prep time for sure, but possibly a little more exam day time pressure on the verbal section. Currently, the verbal section has 3 question types: CR, RC, and SC. Now, some test takers get really good and really fast at SC. SC involves a lot of concepts. That's why it is by far the most learnable of the 3 types. The flip side of this, of course, is that most test takers spend a lot more time on SC during the early stages of their verbal prep. Now, with the Focus Edition, you're going to be able to either cut your prep time significantly or spend more time on other sections. On the other hand, you won't be able to use SC to max your accuracy in CR and RC on exam day. I don't think this will be a problem for most test takers, but CR and RC involve much more reading than SC. So you'll really have to be on point with your time management if you're aiming for a very high verbal score, or if you have concerns about your reading speed. On the current GMAT, you'll see 3, 4, maybe 5 questions on geometry. It's a relatively small part of the quant section. On the Focus Edition, you'll see no questions on geometry because it has been removed from the quant section. Now, I think that you may still need some very basic knowledge of geometry, but overall, this does mean less prep time for you. As for exam day timing, I don't think this will have a major impact unless geometry is a major strength or weakness for you. Did you know the GMAT used to have 2 essays? That's right, all the way from 1994. Then sometime in 2012, GMAT took 1 essay out and put IR in. Well, now it's 2023 and they've decided to finish the job by taking the remaining essay out. I have one very specific concern about this, but we'll take a look at that later. For now, this looks like an easy win. Right now, test takers have the option to take up to 2 8-minute breaks. That means that they have to sit and concentrate for not more than 65 minutes at a time. This number now goes up to 90 minutes or 1.5 hours. That's because the Focus Edition allows test takers only 1 optional 10-minute break, which they can choose to take after either the first or the second section. Effectively, you will have to work through 2 sections with nothing more than a 1-minute instruction screen between them. This could be good for you if you're in the zone, but sometimes we just need some time to recover before switching to a completely different section. On the Focus Edition, we'll be able to do that just once. Okay, so those were the changes that make the Focus Edition shorter and simpler. There's one more change, but this one isn't really about making the exam shorter or simpler. GMAT has decided to expand DS to include questions that don't include math content. Anyway, the bottom line is that they've taken DS out of the quant section and combined it with IR to make a new data insight section. I think these DS questions that don't have any math may look like DS, but they'll play a lot like CR. So this could be really good for you if you like CR but aren't that confident about quant DS. Okay, before we move on, let's quickly summarize these changes. Almost everything we see on the left carries over to the Focus Edition. What are the changes? Firstly, SC and AWA have been cut completely. Secondly, there's no more geometry. And thirdly, DS has been moved to the new DI section. You can now bookmark as many questions as you want in a section. Then if you have time left at the end of that section, you'll see a review screen. You can click on a question number on that screen to go to that question, even if you didn't bookmark it. And if you want to change an answer, you're allowed a maximum of 3 edits. Remember, that's 3 edits, not 3 questions. So if you change your answer to a question and then decide to change the answer to the same question again, you'll end up using 2 of your 3 edits. Now this sounds good, but keep in mind that you don't get any extra time for this. So you have to manage the entire review process within the 45 minutes you have for the section as a whole. In fact, if there's no time left in the section when you finish it, you won't even see the review screen. If I didn't know any better, I'd say that GMAT doesn't actually want us using this feature. Jokes aside, I think that this is a nice option to have. This one is a big change from the current GMAT. Right now, every IR section is fixed, not adaptive. Your score is determined almost entirely by the number of questions you answer correctly. The hardest question is worth exactly as much as the easiest question. So, you can game the system if you want. For example, if you're running short on time, you can guess on a question if it seems to be too long or difficult. That'll help you get to the next question, which hopefully will be easier. All that changes with the Focus Edition. The Focus Edition is moving to an item-level adaptive format for the DI section, so scoring is now going to take question difficulty into account. The bottom line is that the DI section on the Focus Edition will be a bit more like the quant and verbal sections. The GMAT currently provides a basic calculator to test takers in the IR section. The Focus Edition will continue allowing this. The difference, of course, is that DI will now include quant DS questions. So this could be good for you if you sometimes feel the need for a calculator in DS. Again, just to be clear, the calculator is not available in the quant section. I mean, I wish it were, but it's not. It's available only in DI. This isn't a major change. The regular GMAT is quite flexible as far as section order is concerned. The Focus Edition just takes that a step further by allowing you to take the 3 sections in any order you want, which comes to 6 possible orders. And you can take your 1 10-minute break after either the first or the second section. Both the current GMAT and the Focus Edition allow you to send your GMAT score to up to 5 programs for free. The difference is that if you take the current GMAT at a test center, you're forced to choose those programs before your exam even starts. This means you're effectively making that selection blind because you don't know what your score is yet. This is just such a bad policy that many people thought GMAT did this on purpose, to make test takers buy additional score reports after the exams. With the Focus Edition, the process moves to after you get your official score report. Once you do get your official score report, you have a 48-hour window in which to send your GMAT score to up to 5 programs for free. This is a big improvement and it's long overdue. The Focus Edition also gives test takers more choice. Currently, if you take the test center exam more than once, your official score report will include all your earlier scores from the last 5 years. The Focus Edition includes scores from only a single exam in the official score report, so test takers will have more control over what their schools see. GMAT sells a product called the Enhanced Score Report for $30. You can use it to get a better idea about how you performed on a test center GMAT. Now, what the Focus Edition is going to do is it's going to bundle an improved ESR with the official score report, so it's no longer a separate purchase. However, I don't know whether they'll provide an ESR for the online version of the Focus Edition. Okay, we're about to discuss a few important changes, but before we do that, let's quickly review a couple of Focus Edition features. The Focus Edition is shorter and it lets test takers change a few answers. Both these features would normally be expected to reduce the score accuracy of an item-level adaptive test like the GMAT exam. To compensate for this, the GMAT algorithm needs more information, better information, or both. That brings us to the first major change in GMAT scoring. The 200 to 800 total GMAT score is calculated only from your performance on the quant and verbal sections. That's why many test takers just don't take IR seriously. Even schools don't pay much attention to IR, and many GMAT instructors ask their students to aim for only a good enough score on IR, something like a 5. The Focus Edition is going to shake things up here. It's going to use all 3 sections, so that's QR, VR, and DI, to calculate the main 205 to 805 score. And these sections are all weighted equally. So this may mean additional prep time for you, depending on how hard you want to work on data insights. We've all heard how an adaptive test starts with a medium difficulty question. That's a very simple but also quite useful way to look at how the GMAT works. It does make sense. When the algorithm is selecting the first question, it doesn't know anything about the test taker's ability level, so it selects a medium difficulty question. If the test taker answers it correctly, the algorithm selects a harder next question. On the other hand, if the answer is incorrect, the algorithm selects an easier next question. This process repeats until the test taker either answers all the questions or runs out of time. However, if we want the algorithm to work well with fewer questions, if we want to make it more efficient, we can give it a better, more accurate starting point. In this super simple example that you see in front of you, what if the algorithm could start with question number 4 as question number 1? You can see where we're going with this. The Focus Edition will use your performance on an earlier section to select the starting question of the next section. So how well you do on the first section will determine the second section's starting question. Then, how well you do on the second section will determine the starting question of your third section. Will this affect you? I'd have to say probably not. I mean, it is an interesting change, but I don't think most test takers will even realize that the algorithm is doing anything different behind the scenes. In that sense, the Focus Edition is different from the GRE. The GRE uses performance in an earlier section to choose the entire next section of the same type. You definitely feel that on the GRE. Okay, so for now, select the section order that you're comfortable with and make sure that you take at least a few practice tests with your preferred order before your actual exam. We've already seen the new Focus Edition score scale. Scores will start at 205 and go up in 10-point increments to 805. Meanwhile, each section will be scored from 60 to 90 in 1-point increments. Now, if you're wondering what these numbers mean, they don't mean anything, at least not on their own. GMAT just wanted to make it easier for schools to tell Focus Edition scores from regular GMAT scores. When schools actually look at the Focus Edition scores they receive, they'll focus on the percentiles associated with those scores. It's these percentiles that give these numbers meaning. Let's take a look. We'll use DI to understand how to interpret these charts. DI is most closely related to the IR section on the current GMAT. Let's have a look at IR first. Firstly, do you see how small the score scale is? Just 1 to 8 with increments of 1. This is because IR has very few questions. Well, technically, IR has 12 questions, but 4 of those are experimental, so only 8 questions are real questions. With such a small number of questions, the score estimate just isn't accurate enough for a wider scale. Secondly, do you see how big the jumps between scores are? That's the gap between each successive score dot. For example, going up just 1 point from 5 to 6 means a massive jump in percentile from 47 to 64. So if you're actually in the 60th percentile, you'll receive the same score as someone in the 50th percentile. Alright, let's see what the DI section of the Focus Edition looks like. Immediately we see that the shape is different. It's less like a straight line and more like an S. But what I want you to focus on are the differences between scores. That's more important for us. We see relatively small jumps between scores. Clearly, the Focus Edition does a far better job of differentiating between ability levels than the IR section does. That's a good thing. Now, in case you're wondering whether that's just because DI has many more score points than IR, you'd be absolutely correct. That's definitely one reason the DI scale is better at differentiating between ability levels. But as we'll see in a bit, it doesn't always work that way even with a lot of score points. Coming back to the chart, we see a lot of room at the high and low ends. I mean, the final, almost 20% of the scale is devoted to just the top 1% of scores. It looks a little excessive, but these percentiles may or may not hold. As we already know, most test takers don't take IR seriously, and that's the data GMAC used to come up with these percentiles. But on the Focus Edition, DI counts towards the total score, so test takers are going to be highly motivated to do well on the DI section. These percentiles could very well drop as people start pushing themselves to get some of those really high scores. Alright, time to take a look at quantitative reasoning. Now, the current quant scale is a bit of a disaster. For example, see how the 50th percentile is at 45. That's 45 out of 51. Also, look at these massive jumps at the highest end of the scale. This effectively means that test takers who are really good at quant can't really show that to their schools. For example, you could actually be in the 95th percentile, but both you and, more importantly, admissions committees will see that you have the same score as someone at 87 percentile. How about the Focus Edition? The line looks a lot smoother over the entire scale. This means that test takers who are really good at quant will be able to stand out more easily. At least for now. Quant is extremely competitive, so let's see whether these percentiles can hold. The current verbal scale provides a lot of headroom right at the top for the top 1% of scores. Probably more than absolutely necessary, but otherwise it looks pretty good. Let's move on directly to the Focus Edition. The Focus Edition doesn't do much about that headroom, but take a look at the bottom end of the scale. 40% of the scale is for the bottom 8% of scores. And what that does is it ends up squeezing the middle really hard. I mean, every 1 point increase in the middle is like a 10 percentile jump. I don't know why they've done this, but I do know that it's going to look really good in absolute terms. I mean, around 90% of all test takers are going to see a score of at least 73 out of 90 on the verbal section. Time to take a look at the total score, the most important number on your GMAT score report. Both exams do look similar, but there's one big difference. The Focus Edition adds a lot of headroom to the top end of the scale. There are now 11 scores for the top 1% compared to just 5 on the current GMAT. Moving on, we could use percentiles to compare GMAT and GMAT Focus scores, but that's not exactly straightforward. Luckily, GMAC has published tables that allow B schools to compare the two scores directly. Let's take a look at the Focus Edition to current GMAT data. This is how B schools are going to make sense of all these new GMAT Focus Edition scores, at least initially. They're going to map them onto the regular GMAT scores that they've been using for so many years and are so familiar with. Okay, so there are a lot of scores here. Let's focus on 5. We'll start at 600. A score in the 500s or less will make getting into a good school really hard. Now, to be clear, no good school sets a minimum score, and even top-ranked schools admit a few applicants every year with low scores. That said, Anyone with a GMAT score well below a school's average stands a chance of being rejected purely because of their score. Okay, so if we take a look at the table, we see that a score of 555 on the Focus Edition is comparable to a 600 on the current GMAT. Next up, 650. This is a common target for test takers. In fact, for many people, this is where a good score starts. A score of 595 on the Focus Edition is comparable to a 650 on the GMAT. That brings us to the third score on our list, 700. 700 is probably the most common score target. It is a very good score, but it's also just below the average scores at the top schools. This means that someone who's done very well by getting a 700 may need to take a hard call on whether they want to improve that score or just focus on their applications. There's no easy answer here. A 645 on the Focus Edition is comparable to a 700 on the GMAT. Next up, 730. This is top 5 territory. With a score like 730, you should be able to comfortably apply to any school you want. Or let me clarify that. Admissions committees look at a lot of different things, so I'm not saying that this, or any score for that matter, is a safe score. All I'm saying is that most test takers with a score like this may be better off focusing on other aspects of their applications. Okay, what does the table tell us about this score? A Focus Edition score of 675 is comparable to a GMAT score of 730. 760. This outstanding score is famous for being where the 99th percentile starts on the GMAT. This score is also significantly higher than the average score at any school. That said, keep in mind that as good as a 760 is, it still doesn't guarantee an admit. No score does. Or let me put it this way. If you get a score like 760, your GMAT score won't be the reason for a ding. Okay, coming back to the table, a 705 on the Focus Edition is comparable to a 760 on the GMAT. Okay, so should you take the new GMAT Focus Edition? We'll take a look at the important factors you should keep in mind, but let's start with things that you shouldn't take into account. Firstly, you don't need to worry about whether schools will continue to accept the current GMAT now that the Focus Edition is almost out. This isn't the first time the GMAT has changed, and from my experience, from what I have seen, schools don't really care whether you submit a score from an earlier version of a test, as long as your score is valid. All GMAT scores are valid for 5 years, so if you take the current GMAT, you should be fine for at least a few years. Secondly, the current GMAT and the Focus Edition share both the 12-month and lifetime limits. In fact, everything, Test Center, Online, GMAT, GMAT Focus Edition, counts towards those limits. Thirdly, both exams cost the same. And finally, both exams can be taken at either a test center or online. Okay, so those were the things that shouldn't be part of your decision making. Let's take a look at a few scenarios that may apply to you. You're planning to take the GMAT soon. If you're planning to take the GMAT anytime soon, registration for the Focus Edition opens on the 29th of August, and testing will start in Q4 2023. So unless GMAT moves the Focus Edition launch up, you need to take the current GMAT. If you're targeting R1 or both R1 and R2, you should take the current GMAT. I mean, you could also take both, but the point is, if you're targeting R1, you definitely need to take the current GMAT. If you're targeting R2, you may be able to take the Focus Edition, but just keep in mind that you shouldn't target R2 only because you're thinking about taking the Focus Edition. Firstly, I don't think that it's normally a good idea to skip R1 entirely, unless you absolutely need more time to improve your score or work on your essays. Secondly, remember what we discussed. You can always take the current GMAT for R1 and then take the Focus Edition later if you need to. Now, if you're definitely targeting R2, but you're worried that it'd be cutting it too close, you should take the current GMAT. Get that exam out of the way and leave yourself more time for a retake or to work on other aspects of your application. Harvard has already said that it won't accept the Focus Edition for either R1 or R2 this cycle. Wharton has left things slightly more open-ended by saying that at this time, we will not be accepting scores from the GMAT Focus Edition. So if you're applying to Harvard or Wharton, you must take the current GMAT, or both the GMAT for Harvard and Wharton and the GMAT Focus Edition for other schools. Now, as far as I know, as of now, these schools are the only ones not accepting the GMAT Focus Edition. But there's always a little bit of uncertainty when a new exam is introduced. So even if you're not applying to Harvard or Wharton, make sure that you check what your target programs say about the Focus Edition. Now, apart from all the factors we just looked at, you could also take the current GMAT if you're particularly good at SC. Verbal on the Focus Edition may also put you under greater time pressure, so keep that in mind as well. And if you're not too confident about verbal generally, consider taking the Focus Edition, because in the Focus Edition, both verbal and quant will contribute less to the total score. Now, before we move on, I want you to remember that your timelines and what your schools want are far more important factors. They should drive your decision. Okay, we're almost done. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of standardized tests. I'm definitely not one of those people who think that preparing for the GMAT somehow prepares you for B school. I also have some concerns about the Focus Edition, like time management in the verbal section, like how without AWA, schools will have absolutely no way to get at least some idea about whether a candidate wrote their own essays. But I do like data insights. GMAT may have tossed the word data in there because that's what everyone's talking about nowadays. But even the previous name was nice. Integrated reasoning. That's what I remember from my MBA days. Getting lots of different kinds of data and trying to put it all together. If you too like analyzing and interpreting data, I think you like the Focus Edition. Alright, that's all for now. Thank you for attending the session and all the best.